No Sean Monahan, no problem, as the Blue Jackets win their third game in a row, defeating the Seattle Kraken. We're going to talk about who was good and who was better on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team, and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. Now, lots to talk about in last night's game. Lots happened, and lots has happened since then as well. So we're going to talk about last night's game. We're going to talk about who was good and who was great. And there's been a couple of lineup moves as well, especially concerning the goaltending. So we'll talk about that as well. Big win last night. Yes, the Kraken are struggling this season, but they handled the Blue Jackets extremely easily when the Blue Jackets were in town in early November, I think it was. So this was definitely a game that I think they needed to win. They needed to show up for. Being at home is always, important. And the Blue Jackets had to show that they were not just coasting off of the strength of Sean Monahan at forward, because that's the thing, I think, is that, yes, Sean Monahan has been a real revelation for this team. He's been excellent. Injured in the game against Pittsburgh, out for at least a week, hopefully no longer. But that was a big hit. You add Cole Sillinger's sudden illness to that as well. He missed last night's game. Which meant we did a Sillinger swap, which we'll talk about in a minute here. But can this team find success without players? And yeah, they've been doing it all season. Eric Branson got hurt 3 games in. Boone Jenner hasn't played a regular season game yet this season. Like they've been missing key guys, but arguably Monahan is the most key guy. Like, he can make an argument for Werenski. He can make an argument for Monahan. I wouldn't really mind either way. Like, he can make an argument for Marchenko. But with the center depth taking such a hit, you had Adam Fantilli and Sean Corelli as your regular centers, and then Luca Del Bel Belluz, who had 1 career NHL game before last night, and Owen Sillinger, who had 0 NHL games before last night. So going from like Monahan, Fantilli, Sillinger, Corrali to I think what ended up being Fantilli, Del Bel Belluz, Corrali, Sillinger is, there's an adjustment there. And it was really interesting to see the Blue Jackets respond to holes in the lineup, because that's what it is, and they're going to miss Monahan for at least a week. It looks like Cole Sillinger is going to be back. He was skating today. Whether he'll be good to go tomorrow, I'm not sure. I would assume so, since they've returned Owen Sillinger to Cleveland. But that was the big thing for me, was, can this team succeed without Monahan? And also, can Adam Fantilli step up into that 1C spot? Because he was excellent in that in the third period against Pittsburgh. Monahan couldn't finish the game. They moved Fantilli up, put him between Voronkov and Marchenko, and again, he was great. He scored the game-tying goal and was a monster on the ice. And again, I thought he looked great last night. Didn't get the goal that I wanted him to get, but incredible assist to Zach Werenski on what I believe ended up being the game-winning goal for Werenski. His point streak at home continues. He's at 16 straight games right now, which is insane. But Adam Fantilli looked great between Marchenko and Voronkov. Like, you can tell that he's been watching Monahan like a hawk, which is something that I was thinking about in terms of, I don't remember who suggested it, but at the very beginning of the season, there was talks about, like, do you put Fantilli on Monahan's wing and let him learn, like, by playing with him, or do you put him on his own line and let him learn by watching? Because, when Monahan's on the ice, Fantilli is on the bench, and vice versa, so clearly Fantilli has been watching Monahan. He talked a lot about how when he was injured at the end of last season, he watched Boone Jenner a lot before he left the lineup for personal reasons. So like he's clearly very observant, and he clearly likes to sit and watch other players to improve himself. But I thought he did a really, really great job last night in like emulating Monahan in terms of the way that he played. Like he was much more defensively minded last night than I expected, which I think is something that he's picked up from Monahan. But also he played his own game. You know, like they're not a one-to-one copy of players in terms of like their playing style, and it looks like he's really managed to pull the things out of Monahan's game that he can adapt to his own game. And I was really, really impressed with Fantilli. Like this is what I hoped this summer to happen. Is you bring Monahan in, he works with the young guys, you know, your Fantilli, your Sillinger, your Johnson to an extent as well, although I think Johnson's pretty settled on the wing at the minute. You know, he works with them, they learn from him, and then, you know, as he enters kind of the second half of his contract, they're ready to step up and, you know, basically just swap places. You know, Monahan's the 1C at the minute. Fantilli is the Fantilli's the 1C at the minute. Fantilli's probably the 2C when Monahan returns healthy. And then my guess is in a couple of seasons you flip that. Fantilli takes over as the 1C. Monahan becomes the 2C. Probably moves down to 3C depending on what Sillinger's progress is like. But like that's what I hoped would happen, and I'm really excited to kind of see the beginnings of that take place, because you can see Fantilli growing and getting better, and I think a lot of that is to do with Monahan. Also, there's been some talk about Fantilli's point production not being where people wanted it to be. Well, don't look now, but he's got 5 points in his last 4 games. He's got a 4-game point streak going. And he is currently on pace for a 40-point season, which would be a big improvement on last season. He had 27 points, and he's picked that up in the last kind of, again, 4 or 5 games. So like fully a quarter of his points on the season have come in the last 4 games. So like if he keeps that up, he's gonna, you know, my hope is that he can finish the season at 50 points or above. Like 60 points would be great, 30 goals, 30 assists. But, you know, between 50 and 60 points, I think would be great for Adam Fantilli, who like has struggled like putting the puck in the net in the first little bit of the season here. So hopefully he's going to take that next step. I think playing with Voronkov and Monahan will be Voronkov and Marchenko will be a big boost to him there. If only because he can probably just set those guys up all day long and watch Marchenko make the goalies look silly and watch Voronkov be a pain in the butt in front of the goalie. So you love to see it. You really do. I want to talk about also the other guys that stepped up. With Monahan out and with Sillinger ill, it came to a couple of monsters call-ups. One who has just recently named to the AHL All-Star game in Luca Del Bel Belluz. He's currently leading the entire AHL in scoring. I think he's got 37 points in 32 games or something wild like that. As a 21-year-old, I think. 21-year-old, 22-year-old, still very, very young is my point. So I want to talk about him, and I also want to talk about Owen Sillinger making his NHL debut and how cool that was. So we're going to take a quick break, and then when we get back, we'll talk about that on today's Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I'm going to tell you about FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. It's $200 whether you win or lose. Just open the app, find a live bet, a same-game parlay, anything you can. Put $5 on it, and if it's your first time betting on FanDuel, you're going to get $200 that you can then use on literally whatever you want. Like, if I was you, I might put $5 on Adam Fantilli scoring a goal against St. Louis on Saturday. That feels like a pretty safe bet to me. So go to FanDuel.com to join today. Again, get started with $200 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We're talking about the guys that stepped up with people being out of the lineup in last night's big win over the Seattle Kraken. And I was really, really impressed with both Luca Del Bel Belluz and Owen Sillinger. Luca Del Bel Belluz is a guy that I've been a big fan of his for a couple of seasons now. Like, he's trending really, really nicely. He made a big push to be with the team at the end of training camp, didn't make the cut, went to Cleveland, and became their number one center, has played a lot with Trey Fix-Wolanski on the top line for them this season, and like I said, is leading the AHL in scoring right now, and also he has 2 career NHL games and 2 career NHL goals, which is a ratio that I think is going to be hilarious if he keeps that up. Had a goal and an assist last night, played 2C instead of what I assumed. I assumed that they were going to put Kuraly up there and it was going to be kind of an adventure, but they put Del Bel Belluz up there, and I thought he did a great job. Played with Johnson and Van Riemsdyk. Van Riemsdyk had 2 assists, and Ken Johnson had that just absolutely disgusting Connor Bedard-like goal that I think that was the straw that broke the Kraken's back. And they ended up doing a goalie swap after that goal. But there was a really interesting, like, not quite quote, but it came out after the game that basically Don Waddell and Dean Everson had kind of had a conversation and said, right, what we're going to do is when we call these guys up from Cleveland, we're going to play them where they would play in the lineup in Cleveland. So if they're a top 6 player getting called up, you play them in the top 6 in Columbus. If they're a top 4 defenseman, you play them in the top 4 in Columbus. You don't call up your best young center and then stick him on the 4th line and play him, 6 minutes a night. And that really worked out well in Del Bel Belluz's favor. I don't know that he is a top 6 player in the long run for this team, like maybe a middle 6, probably a bottom 6, but like if you can get your third line center, your 3rd or 4th line center for Del Bel Belluz, and you get, 10, 15 goals from him a season, that to me feels like a big success. Del Bel Belluz, obviously former 2nd round pick, had his rookie season last year with the Monsters and did a pretty good job. Took him a minute to get in the lineup, if I remember rightly. I think he was a healthy scratch for the first 4 games of the season. Then they put him in, and then he stayed in the lineup basically the rest of the season. So this kid clearly has like the drive to survive. He works really hard, and I think it was a really smart idea giving him all of that ice time, giving him that responsibility last night, putting him in where Cole Sillinger would normally be playing, right next to Ken Johnson. And Ken Johnson, I feel like, makes it easy to play with him as well. Like, you can just kind of do what you want and know that he's going to be there to do something ridiculous at the same time. So Del Bel Belluz really taking advantage of the situation that he's found himself in. Remains with the team. Suspect he'll be there until Monahan gets back. Going to be interested to see what happens when Sillinger returns, because my guess is Sillinger will retake his position next to Kent Johnson, and then they'll probably drop Del Bel Belluz down to play with Zach Aston-Reese and Olivier, which actually that's a line I like a lot. Like, that line is going to work hard. They're going to make it unpleasant for the other team. They're going to be a pain in the butt about it. So we'll see what happens there. But top marks to Del Bel Belluz for his season debut, his 2nd ever NHL game. I also was pretty impressed with Owen Sillinger. I've called him Boone Jenner Light for a minute now, because he plays that kind of role down in Cleveland of you put him wherever you want in the lineup and he's going to work hard. He's going to, crash and bang and throw his weight around. He's a leader down there. By all accounts, he's extremely popular in the room. And he came up and he did exactly the same things that he does in Cleveland in the NHL. So I think literally like his first or second shift, he went into one of the corners, disrupted one of the Kraken defensemen, came away with the puck, and then that line had a pretty lengthy offensive zone shift. He was on a 2-on-1 that I think he was like this close to scoring on. Adam Larsson came back just in time to stop him from getting a clean shot away. But again, like really impressed with Del Bel Belluz, with Sillinger, in terms of like Sean Monahan's, like, that's a big set of shoes to fill as a center on this team, and I think both Del Bel Belluz and Sillinger, though they didn't fill Monahan's specific role, I think accounted themselves pretty well. I really suspect that we'll see Owen Sillinger back in the NHL sooner rather than later. So that's just a really fun story. Undrafted, did 4 years at Bemidji State, and signed an NHL contract a couple of years ago, earned an NHL contract this summer off the back of last season, and then made his NHL debut last night at the age of 27. It's really, really fun to see. Shout out also to Denton Mateychuk getting his first NHL goal. I'm sure he would have liked it to be a little bit prettier, but hey, once the first one comes, I suspect we're going to see a little bit more. He was doing his best Zach Werenski impression, which is really fun. You can kind of see similarities in both of their games. Zach Werenski's a little bigger, a little heavier, but Mateychuk, you can see, has the same kind of offensive instinct as Werenski, which is going to be a problem for other teams, and it's going to be a lot of fun for us. I also wanted to, not a call up or a young guy, obviously, but I wanted to talk a little bit about Ivan Provorov, who has really impressed me since moving back over to the right side to play with Mateychuk. I was surprised that was the decision that they made. I thought that they would just put Mateychuk and Severson together, but they've mostly played him with Provorov, which I like a lot, and I liked a lot last season, and like the very few and far between times this season when Jiricek was in the lineup and they played him with Provorov, I thought that was when Provorov played some of his best hockey, when he was playing with Jiricek, and he's playing really good hockey now with Mateychuk as well. And I don't know whether that's that he's taking on kind of a responsibility role, whether he's stepping back and letting Mateychuk learn and step forward, and he's like, right, okay, well, I'll play defense because Mateychuk is more kind of offensively minded. But I've really like the top four at the minute is just I'm really pleased with the top four. It's going really well. Again, Fabro, like, it's a real revelation. Zach Werenski, we don't even have time to talk about how great Zach Werenski is doing. 48 points this season. Had another goal last night to tie Cale Makar for the defensive scoring lead in the NHL. He's 1 point behind. I think Makar has 49 points to Werenski's 48, but like, Werenski for Norris. Like, it was a joke a couple of weeks ago, and now it's no longer a joke. Like, he's leading the entire league in time on ice per game, and he's just an absolute monster out there. You really love to see it. I want to talk a little bit about goaltending next. I want to talk about special teams, and I want to talk about what the team needs to do to step up from where they are right now. Not that where they are right now isn't good, but they've got a lot of teams hot on their heels. They need to keep this going. So we're going to talk about all of that in just a second here at Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I've got to tell you about Game Time, because I love going to last-minute hockey games, and Game Time is where I get my tickets for that. Quite often when I'm in California, we'll finish work, me and my partner will check out Game Time and be like, hey, we can pay $18 to go and see the Sharks. Let's do that. And it's 5 p.m. We jump in the car, we go downtown, and the seats are great. They're cheap. The team is trying real hard, but you can't really complain with Game Time. And I don't. I do the opposite of complaining. In fact, I recommend it to everyone I talk to. It's so much better than any other ticketing website that I've used, and it's basically the one I use exclusively now. You've got views from your seats, you've got all-in pricing, so there's no surprise fees at checkout, and they've got the most flexible customer service policy in the industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We're going to talk about goaltending first. Just a quick pit stop in the goaltending. Elvis was excellent last night. 2 goals on, I think, 31 shots. Yeah, 29 saves. He was due a good game. I thought he played very well against Pittsburgh. The stats didn't necessarily reflect that, but he's back with the 9 a 9:30 something tonight, I believe, last night, a 9:35 it was, and was extremely good. The penalty kill was perfect. No power play goals for the Seattle Kraken. Partially that was mostly Eakins, who made some excellent saves. Can he keep it up? I don't know. The other thing with the goaltending is Daniil Tarasov, after choosing not to accept a conditioning assignment to the AHL a couple of weeks ago, has now accepted it. He's going to play tonight and tomorrow against the Laval Rocket with the Cleveland Monsters. And then I believe 14 days is the max that they can keep him down there. But it sounds like they're going to call him back up, and he's going to get an NHL start next week, either against the Flyers or against the Sharks. So like easing him back into NHL competition, let's say. This I think is the best thing for him. We'll see Jet Greaves with the team in St. Louis. My guess is Elvis. Like Elvis will probably start. He's been riding the hot hand with Elvis for a while now, and again, he's inconsistent, but he's doing better than last season. You know, he's played 28 games so far. Last season, he only played 41 all season. The season before that, he only did 20 games. And he's got 15 wins. So his save percentage is creeping back up. It's at an 8.89 at the minute. So if the pattern is to be believed, we'll get a couple more good Elvis games, and then he'll start to slide a little bit. But right now, I'm happy enough with how Elvis is playing for the most part. I'm going to knock on wood there, because otherwise he'll make me regret saying that. But like, what I wanted from Elvis was for him to be average and better than last season, and so far he's pretty much been both of those. So we'll see. I still think that the goaltending needs to be shaken out. I think that's something they address in the summer. But as of like right now, again, I'm kind of, the attitude I'm taking with the goaltending is kind of the attitude that I've been taking with the whole season, where I'm like, you know what? This is fine. They're playing with house money. Just enjoy the wins and don't sweat the losses too much. I know that it's my job to get mad about the losses. It's not my job to get mad about the losses. I choose to get mad about the losses on this podcast. But my point is, I'm just going to continue to take the house money that I get from a good Elvis performance, and we'll deal with the goaltending in the summer. Hopefully, Daniil Tarasov can find his game in Cleveland. He'll be back next week. We'll see if he's knocked some of the rust off, and we'll see how he does in the AHL this weekend. Special teams, I wanted to just kind of touch on a little bit, because the Blue Jackets have very quietly snuck into top 10 in the league in power play percentage, which is shocking, quite frankly. They are 10th in the league right now. They've got a 23.6% success rate. The penalty kill is getting a little bit leaky. They're 28th in the league right now, although they didn't allow any last night, which is great. But the power play, if the power play continues to click like it is, again, they didn't score on their one power play attempt last night. But I'm not like super worried about that. They had power play goals in 4 straight games before that. And they scored, I think, 3 power play goals against Boston a couple of weeks ago. So, you know, the power play continues to click, continues to roll. We'll see if it keeps doing that with Monahan out. I think he was a big driver of the power play. So we'll see if Adam Fantilli can take on Monahan's role even at man advantage, as well as at even strength. He did great in Pittsburgh, scored that game-tying goal on the power play, being in the exact spot where Monahan should be. And that's all we can ask of him, you know? So hopefully the power play continues to roll. Hopefully the penalty kill improves a little bit. We'll see from there. But that's kind of it for my my fly around all of the topics that I wanted to cover. I want to talk a little bit about like what's next for this team. So like obviously they've won 3 in a row. They are in the second wildcard spot. They are a point behind Boston for the first wildcard spot, and they have 2 games in hand over Boston as well. They have a -3 goal differential, which doesn't sound great until you realize that Boston, who's just ahead of them, has a -27, and Pittsburgh, who's just behind them, has a -26. Pittsburgh has the same number of points as the Blue Jackets, but has played one extra game. They are sitting at 44 points with a record of 18, 17, and 8. The Blue Jackets are 19, 17, and 6. So it's only going to get harder from here. Ottawa, Montreal, Detroit, the Rangers are all hot on their heels. Ottawa and Montreal have 41 points. Detroit and New York Rangers have 40. The Islanders have 39. So do the Flyers. And then the Sabres are coming in at 37 points as well. So, they're 7 points behind the Blue Jackets in WC2. So it's not like they're not completely out of the race yet, and so it is going to be a battle. They can't start coasting, and I think this upcoming couple of weeks is going to be key for this team, because they're playing a bunch of teams that they should ostensibly beat, but teams that they have already lost to this season for the most part. St. Louis, they have beaten already, I believe. Philadelphia, they've lost to. The Sharks, they've lost to. The Rangers, they haven't played yet. The Islanders, they've beaten. These are all teams below them in the standings. So the next 5 games are teams below the Blue Jackets in the standings. You need to take, honestly, I would expect at least 8 points out of those 5 games. We'll see what happens, but that, to me, feels really important for the Blue Jackets to not let their foot off the gas, because whether they make the playoffs or not, it's about getting that winning experience, and I would love, even if this team doesn't make the playoffs at the end of the year and, we're sitting here, it could be a case of, I believe the Blue Jackets and the Ottawa Senators play 3 times in March. Let me pull up the March schedule just to confirm that. They play once on March 29th, and then they play again on April 6th and April 8th. Those 3 games could be absolutely huge. If you get to April 8th, and the Blue Jackets are still in the fight for a playoff spot, this season is a victory, So that's kind of how I feel about that. I still think they're probably sellers at the deadline, even if they're in a playoff position, unless they, go on this insane hot streak starting now, I'm going to knock on wood, and end up, second or third in the Metro. But I don't think, my guess is that they probably sell at the deadline. There's no point mortgaging the future right now, because that's what Jarmo Kekalainen did when he brought in Provorov, Severson, etc., and it set the rebuild back a couple of seasons, So you want to keep building, but you don't necessarily want to build too fast, which I think was Kekalainen's mistake. That being said, I'm having fun. This has been a fun season. Which it feels weird to say that when you consider how kind of the season started and everything, but the Blue Jackets are playing good hockey. They look like they're having fun. Everyone who's supposed to be playing well is playing well. It's the vibes are good. Enjoy the vibes, That's kind of all I've got for today. We'll be back on Monday. We'll talk about tomorrow night's game against the St. Louis Blues. We'll take a look at the upcoming schedule. We'll check in with how Janil Tarasov did in his conditioning stint down in Cleveland. That's all coming up on Monday's episode. Thank you for listening to this episode, for making it your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Until Monday, make sure you stay locked on.